transform people in video. So somehow your website comes to life and you don't recognize the purpose of the picture.
Welcome. My name is Jonas. As already said, I am a Debian developer, and the last couple of years I've been involved in European Parliament Free Software User Group, ACTA, helping Eric Wilson and other people in the Parliament using free software inside the Parliament. What I will be talking about here is this work, some of the work, some of the latest work that has gone out of this development in ACTA. I have not myself been so very involved in ACTA, but Eric and others have worked on this ACTA case that, as I understand it, is formally closed now. It's dead, it's killed, but all of the ideas, all of the powers behind this ACTA case are still moving forward, and maybe under different names will come up or are popping up already, trying to make the similar laws. So to understand a little bit about my own involvement in these things, I consider myself as no, I'm not a politician. I don't believe in the formal politics, the country politics, and even less about international politics, like European Parliament is so far away. I believe that, of course, they have big powers and they do a lot of stuff, but I have no influence in these things. It's not really where I can do a change. Until recently, when I got involved in episodes for other reasons, I was invited to give a talk about a different project I was involved in. And then I realized that we could actually do a difference. But when I think more about it, it's the power of a society, or the power of a state. I know, I've learned this thing about this splitting of power, that you have you're writing, making the laws, and then you are policing the government, the states, executing the laws, you could say, and then you are judging if this execution by the police and the institutions on a daily basis, if it's done properly, if it's fair, the way it's being running in the daily basis. So you have the lawmaking and the policing of the state, and then you have the judgment. And what have been focused most on, and what the left-wing activists that have been a lot of my friends, that they especially have been shouting a lot about is this: is there too much police in the streets? Is this a police state? Or is the lawmaker, the judgment, is that being unfair? The way they're doing the judgments is they're favoring some opinions and stuff. But I haven't at all been focused on the lawmaking. And that's a little crazy when I look at how I'm involved in free software. Because if we take a comparison, then, well, the lawmaking is writing code. We're formalizing what is the ideals, what is the reasons, what do we want, the purpose of this code. And then we're executing the code. We're running the code on a daily basis. And then maybe if it doesn't behave properly, then we're intervening. Like we're quitting the program, or we maybe even rip out the cable if it's really acting irresponsible, our machines. And if we apply the same logic, the same mindset as I and most, if not all of my friends are applying to society, that's exactly what some of the insane people that I know is doing when they're saying, oh, I have this iPhone. How do I run safe things on this machine? Because that's completely insane to ask this question. The first thing you do is you throw away this hardware because it's unusable, because you have no control over the code. The first rule for a hacker is you need to be running free software, else it's a lost case, because something underneath can do whatever. It can undermine everything you are doing. So if we're only looking at a society of, is it a police state or a society of is the judgments corrupted, then we have no real control, because what corrupted about what? Corrupt about the laws that is completely insane or is serving a different purpose, but doing it in a sneaky way, doing it in a way that we really don't understand. So what we really need to understand and work with, the same as hackers, is we need to understand the code of the state that we are involved in. So what has been done in the ACTA case to fight against these pressures of commercial entities, especially in America, is trying to capture these traces, these small traces of the negotiations happening behind closed doors. I mean, the thing is, I myself have been trying to understand what this is about. There's a parliament, there's a commission, there's different entities that has these great powers of the European Union. And what the ACTA case has been about is the policy making before the formal policy making. There's the changing laws officially is that you are voting for some proposals to changes to law. But what is happening before that is that someone comes up with these long pieces of paper for proposals for changes. And these papers is not something that you just do in 5 minutes. It's something that, for the ACTA case, took, I think, 6 years in the making of making these proposals to, well, shouldn't we just change these massive bits of lawmaking in the European Union that should then be enforced in all of the member states? So even if the formal part of the policy making in the parliament is still transparent, you can see what every politician is voting. What you cannot see is how did that document come to be, and what does it really contain. There might be something, details about the way that a word is phrased, a word is picked. The choosing of words, the choosing of sentences can be crucial to the meaning, the intentions of the laws, the resulting laws. So what Eric and other people have been doing is hunting down traces, leaks of internal negotiations, and then trying to, each time there's a leak, trying to read through all the documents, trying to figure out what is this about. But also when there's more than one leak over time, try to compare what has changed from the last leak to this new leak. Because through the changes, we know that some of them, the ones of us who are working with patches and code changes, we know that this is called a diff in programming. So if you have a diff, you have the highlighting of the very pieces that have changed. The problem with these leaks is that they come from different sources and they come in different shapes. We don't have the luxury of a version control system, and we don't have the luxury of everybody writes in the same way. Everybody uses tabs as indentations, or everybody uses 8 spaces instead. We don't have these luxuries of structuring the code the same way. One secretary is typing in Word using one skeleton, and another one is typing in using another skeleton, which means that the line endings and the size of the characters and stuff like that is different. And then both of them is then producing a PDF, and one of them is printing it out, and we have only a photocopy. So a photocopy of one Word template and a PDF of another Word template. Try to compare those two, and you have everything lining up as being different, because the placement of the page in the PDF is different. So the work that Eric and others have been doing in the past has also involved, in addition to the work of interpreting what political meaning does these texts have. They have also had the practical work of trying to figure out what is really different, what has changed here. And through insisting on having Eric walk me through the work that he has been doing in the past, practically what he has done was using a wiki, like Wikipedia. So he's running his own wiki, and then he posts one of the leaked documents, and then posting another of the leaked documents as the next version. And then he's switched over to the show the source, show the difference between the versions. Which is technically is the same as I said. Oh, yeah. I know that from the command line. I'm using a diff. The diff command. Diff dash RU capital. That shows the difference between the two. But and then he learns that it doesn't work because things have been moved around and there's a lot of shuffling that he needs to do. So he has been by hand corrected the sources so that they are easier to diff with each other. And then he has done other tricks. He has found out a way to hint that if some text areas have moved to another area of the document, then you can hint that this has moved to another place by using a string of pi, so that it matches identically, and then he can make his make Wikipedia or the wiki engine show the diff in a user-friendly way. The big flaw to me about the way that Eric is working is that it's handwork. It's hand editing the thing that should be machine done by a machine. The reason I say that it should be done by a machine is not only, well, of course, if it was done by a machine, we all know that it works much faster. You can quicker get to the political work. But also, when Eric is doing it by hand, it means that others, maybe people that are politically disagreeing with Eric and his the Greens group, they cannot use his work. And the real essence, as I see it, is not really that we win this battle. No, it is that we take these sources, this data, we take it out in the open. And sure, we want to win the battle, but we don't want to win the battle by the dirty tricks that others have been using, because they don't work the best. What is most powerful is if we can say, these are not interpretations, these are facts. It is a fact that this is the 15 changes from the last document. So don't come here and tell us that something else has been going on in the last couple of months behind closed doors, because this is a fact. You can't dispute these facts, because the way that we extracted the facts is completely redoable. Anybody can run the same code, the same machinery, and get to the same result. If you come to a different result, please let's debate the method. So what we've come up with, Eric and I, is that we need to change from having these scattered patterns, these pieces of leaks. We need to move to a more something I call it archaeology. That we need to make it a science of how to find these facts. So archaeology really is about having artifacts, small traces, and then through scientific methods, you extract facts about that. You could extract facts about how the age. You extract facts about what does it contain, what is it really. And similarly, we need to, through some pseudo-scientific methods, we need to have a single way to get more meaning out of these clumsy sources. And the way that I have found to do that is a tool called Catmandu. It's a tool developed for library work. It's for librarians, not librarians of code, but librarians of books, documents. So if you want to create a search engine optimized for some special purposes in a library, you have a pile of documents and they come in different shapes. You want to extract some of the metadata from these documents, and then in order to harmonize these different sources, you maybe need different patches, different hacks to the metadata, so that you can streamline it and have it in a single search engine, a single web page, or whatever interface you are setting up. And maybe you also want to then export your output in some formats for like a directors meeting, and they want some numbers, they want some statistics. So this shuffling back and forth between documents having metadata, and then you want different kinds of formats as the output. I'm reusing this tool, Catmandu, abusing the logic and saying, well, all of the letters of the sources are metadata, so to speak. All of them are crucial, but not the layout, not the placement of documents. I don't care about the placement, but I do care about, oh, is it indented? Then it's not about the placement, but semantically that means that it's a new chapter of this document. So the way that the secretary has laid out the letters on the page, there are some semantic meaning to that. And I need to re-engineer, or reverse engineer, what did the secretary mean by typing it in like this? Because technically it's broken into pieces, it's broken into letters typically. When you export from Word to PDF, you lose the semantic meaning of what is a sentence and what kind of sentence is it. So I'm using this Catmandu tool to formalize, to group. If I get a source from this kind of machinery, this kind of Word secretary setup, then I know, I can recognize some patterns and say, oh, this is coming from this kind of source. I can recognize that the indentation of 2.5 centimeters means this kind of chapter. So that's one kind of filter. Everything coming from that secretary is filtered through the same filter. The results is then the same from different filters. So I can have 15 different sources. 7 of them come from one origin, and one of them comes from an OCR dump that I need to maybe do something by hand with. But all of this, I can then separate. What did I do to which source? And anybody can then double check that I didn't cheat, that I didn't miss out on some of the pieces that I needed to extract. The end result of this is to separate what is the political fight about how do we debate these changes that have been done here in the negotiation process, separate that from actually extracting what is going on in these negotiations. Then, when we have this tool working, the next step is to, as I call it, get boring. Make the tool so boring, so ordinary, so obvious that anybody can use it later on. It's both about having it user-friendly, but for me, technically, the most crucial part is that it needs to not die out. It needs to be maintained later on. It needs to be, in my world, I'm a Debian developer, I'm part of the boring Debian distribution who's just always working. It's so boring, it just works. And what I want for this tool is also that it becomes part of the Debian ecology of just keeping it alive and making it just working. No fancy dramatic changes to it, it's just, it should be usable for the sources factory as a small machinery in that. Right now, I'm working with Eric, and Eric needs it practically for his work as advisor in the parliament. But the users could be people, NGOs who are watching what is going on in the parliament. If they are especially eager to track some documents and the process of some documents that have leaked, then they could also use this same tool. It's not so much for the politicians themselves, because the politicians, as I understand it, they are closer to the process, and on one hand they can get involved in the very teams that then get secret access. On the other hand, they are probably too busy in their jobs to do this hacker work of interpreting these leaks. So It's for hacker-minded activists who want to share their results with journalists, where the journalists would be interested in having this data being solid. So it's to improve the quality of the interpretations of these. I'm going forward a little too fast here, but so one of my worries of this no, it's yeah. In a way, I've said already what I wanted to say. So,
where is Catmandu now? Where is it used?
Catmandu is developed by some librarian researchers in Belgium for targeted librarians, and it's a stable it's a set of libraries for Perl that is. The core library is stable, and then it's growing its different plugins for import filters and export filters. But some of the filters is directly relevant for possibly for exporting some statistics, some things. But some of them is, well, the imports we need to add some extra filters because the kinds of odd things that we want to do is different. But the core tool exists and is stable now. What is this? No, not in Debian. It's currently being packaged for Debian by Vasudev and me, a colleague of mine. So I expect it to be packaged for Debian within the next month or two, and then the real work parallel to that is in setting up use of this framework. I mean, did anyone get what I'm talking about here? You have any questions about it? Because I wouldn't have been able to follow such a short version of it myself. But
sorry. I'm just wondering, how is the coding work? Is it enough coders to do the tasks, or how is the progress going?
Progress is going too slow. Yes, I would love to have more people working on this. The concept, what I want to do is quite clear. The way I want to do it is I'm picking this Catmandu library, which is written in Perl. Some might be scared away by that. I'm a simple hacker. I only know Perl, so I wouldn't be able to do it in Python or other tools like that. So, but if you are thinking that you want to help, that will be very lovely. So.
I'm not promising anything, but
no.
It's very interesting.
Great.
It's more a comment than a question that, I mean, there are other people who have been perfecting these kind of tools for a long time, and those are the intelligence agencies who are doing that, partly, of course, from their intelligence work, which is closed to scrutiny and so on, but of course there's also the other part which is called OSINT. OSINT, Open Source Intelligence, which means that you have intelligence agencies that work with open public documents, and then they do automatic analysis and extraction of data and metadata and so on. Quite similar to what you're doing, but probably on a larger scale.
Excellent.
But the point then, of course, the end result of that analysis is kept within the intelligence agencies. So what you're trying to do now is kind of OSINT, open source meaning using open source and free software tools, but also using primarily open source documents, to some extent links. So it's a bit twist on the interpretation of OSN. But the point is that there is quite some quite some knowledge and quite a lot of tools and research that has went into this kind of thinking, but most of it is not public because it's kept internal to the methods of the intelligence agencies.
Interesting, and of course it's embarrassing, but I'm sure there's other work already being done. But what I do know that exists is the work on getting public the actual documents, or whatever is formal in the parliament work is from Tratton and from this PAR track is tracking what is formal. Yeah. And then it could be except, but the work on comparing documents, the closest I have been able to find is some research work on comparing different traces of scriptures, ancient scriptures, and comparing those
you can probably find, if you dig a bit into computational linguistics and so on, you can probably find some related work. But I do think it's just interesting to frame and to understand what you're doing in terms of you're actually doing intelligence work. In very much sense of the government and the intelligence agency, they're trying to extract kind of semi-intelligence information about what is really happening.
Yeah.
So it's basically the same kind of thinking.
Yeah, but to me it's no surprise. See, my girlfriend is laughing also, but to me it's not that surprising actually that also I'm involved in the Freedom Box, and the more I thought about the Freedom Box when we started working on this and trying to, when it sunk in the whole concept of what is the Freedom Box, to me the best description of the Freedom Box is your own personal spying on you, because the point of that is when spying is only bad when it's done on others. The whole fairness logic of it. Well, if you spy on yourself, then it's not called spying anymore. It's called support. So and sure, this intelligence work is trying to piece together the puzzle in more efficient ways. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't understand the technical difficulties of this work, because how I understand it is that you have two texts and then you just need to compare the text. How you get this text? By object character recognition, or I don't care so much. So why is this Catmandu so? Why don't you just compare it text by text? This I don't see. I didn't understand the technical difficulties. No. This indentation and so on, for me, I don't see it as an important factor. You just are interested in what text is there, what phrases are there, no? The words that are there, and you just compare them. Well, you find this is a part of the text lower down, okay, maybe this is a little more technically difficult, but otherwise, what is the technical difficulty? This I didn't understand.
No. And you might be right. It might be much simpler. I might have missed something. I thought it was relatively simple. When I started out, well, let's just find the right diff options, and then it will do it automatically for me. That's an old challenge, right? It's done. I wasn't able to do it, and I wasn't able to do it even when I wrote a page full of Perl regex and trying to juggle that approach. Then I tried to look into some libraries doing diffing in different ways, so like word diffing, character diffing, things like that, instead of being line-based diffing, which is the most common way of doing diffs. But the whole diff research is an area. I'm not a researcher on this. I'm just a hacker. Yeah. And if you can point me to the things, or if you want to try, I'd love to share with you what is. But yes, the problem is very simple. It is just two documents which has been shaken in different ways, thrown through some export filters of Word and then into some PDFs and maybe into some OSR. But just forget about the OSR, because that's of course it will be dirtier documents by that. But just I have just been exercising different kinds of exports to PDF, then importing, dumping, flattening to plain text, and without being so messy that people would be, with a good reason, would be skeptical if I missed something, if I missed some pieces, because I was too hard at the text. Yeah, I was massaging them.
But I also think that one part of the challenge is actually extracting meaningful metadata and not only the plain text. Because knowing that this is the heading, this change that this word is now in italics, it wasn't before, and whatever knowing that this is a heading and so on, that kind of metadata also has a meaning.
Yeah.
And if you extract it to plain text, you lose that metadata.
Yeah, and what I found was actually, yes, what I did was dumping not to plain text, but dumping to an HTML export of PDF, HTML presentation, so that I could run through the tags and the placements of through CSS with placement indentations and things like that. But it became so messy, and then I take the new PDF file and it's slightly different, and it's like the amount of what is actually the framework or what is to run this through the machinery became so much that, to me, the essential part of this is that you end up with something that is clear-cut separation of what is the different parts of the process. Yeah?
Did you want to talk about DebianParl?
Yes. Thank you. I'm a Debian developer, and one of the things that how many of you, I see a lot of people who know about Debian. How many of you know about Debian pure blends? 2 persons, 3 persons, 4. Whoa, great. Debian pure blends is related to what Fedora calls spins. It's and what Ubuntu does by making their Kubuntu and Xubuntu and their different branches. Debian is aimed at being the universal computer system. It covers everything. The bad side of that is that it doesn't cover it very well. It's the averaging of everything. So everybody gets something that is potentially perfect for them, but they just have to customize it themselves. They just have to activate the pieces that they need. So there's these 60,000 packages, or how many we have at the moment, and you just have to pick the right pieces, and then you have to customize the right pieces. Debian Pure Blends is work within Debian to optimize for different special interest groups. And I started at Blend effort to make a Debian Pure Blend, or it's not pure yet, but it's just started, but a Debian blending effort for parliamentary workers. So what is it that is relevant to do for inside a parliament? And rightfully, some people have asked me, so what is so special about parliamentary workers? And sure, it might turn out that after working with it a lot, I end up saying, maybe we should just rename this to be Debian Office. Because what people do in a parliament is that they're opening their Word documents and they're reading their Outlook mails, and they're doing all of the same boring stuff as other people are doing in their offices. Maybe. But one of the pieces that I have recognized working with Eric is that there is a need for working with this legislative process, following the. A person like Eric, I'm not talking about people who are elected into parliament. I'm talking about people who are working in parliaments. All of the helpers for the politicians. So where the politicians are voting and maybe also are office workers a little bit, then there's a bunch of people who are tracking their work and supporting the works of the politicians. And one of the pieces that I see could be powerful is when you are left out of the conversations that was supposed to be in utmost transparency, as Eric was talking about an hour ago, then you can try to recreate this transparency by analyzing the traces that you get, the leaks that you get. Either that you are handed by your politicians under an agreement that you don't share with anybody, or that you get from WikiLeaks or whatever, public source. So where an NGO working outside of the parliament, they might be able to use a tool like this diffing machinery. Then a person inside the parliament might have different documents to see into this machinery that they are not allowed to share with an NGO external because of this lack of transparency. Or maybe because of political tricks of you are not allowed to release this information yet because we have some debate going on. So DebianParl is a project to try to optimize Debian for parliamentary workers. At the moment, it's optimized for one person in the whole universe, which is Gary Josephson, because he's the only test subject I have.
No, we have two actually. Dimitrios is we're a couple of members of it too.
And Eric is already excitedly going ahead of me and talking about the future thing of having the next person, Dimitrios, who is also working in the European Parliament. That's true. In the future, in the near future, very near future, we will have another one. Both of them being close friends and similar point of view on free software and working in the same institution, which is the European Parliament. It would be very interesting to have additional test subjects in different spread out governments or parliamentary institutions. I've been talking a little bit with Mari about getting in touch with people in the Icelandic government, and I would love to talk to people in the Paris Party, is that right? No, sorry. There were some people from the Paris Party in Germany here also that was curious to get my hands on and try to convince to work directly with them on what are their needs, how could they imagine things. And the whole point here is not optimizing it for left-wing work. It's not a politically biased optimization. It is the practical work on policy making. I think that was my marketing speech about DebianParl.
I can add to the need for diffs or tools that create the comparison between texts. But in some stages of the procedure, the Commission and the Parliament and the Council have different opinions on a particular proposal. And there's a whole institution. Everybody then talks about that we have to have this 4-column document. And the 4-column document has to be released 48 hours prior to the next negotiation. And this 4-column document, it's a whole department that is working with this 4-column document. And the 4-column document is where you then should be able to see the different institutions' opinions on a certain piece of legislation. And in the Parliament, you talk about this 4-column document as if it's something that has to come from above. It's authorized by the President or something like that. Well, when it's really, probably it would be simple, not that difficult to recreate that 4-column document with something like Catmandu or some other project or software. And if you can make the tools that we use in the Parliament publicly available so that people understand what we do, then you kind of automatically get an understanding and get more democracy. It's quite simple. But as long as the process is considered inside the Parliament as almost magic, and then it's even more magic to people on the outside. So the whole purpose of the EXOG is basically to bring people on the outside in to the process and to take the process and the secrecy of the institution out in the process. And to have this hole in the wall between inside and outside. And I strongly believe in, maybe you weren't here, but I said before that my experience from why I ended up in the Parliament is through technical activism, hackers that have produced knowledge by programming that opened up the political process for people that had no idea that, how things work. So we have done it once, we have done it twice. Software patents, ACTA, things that can't be done. Have never been done before. Maybe they can be repeated in some other way. But you can't kill a directive in second reading. We did that with software patents. You can't reject an international agreement by voting in Parliament. Never heard of it. We have done impossible things. And programmers have played an extremely important role in both those processes. And it's all about getting all this, lots of it is about getting complicated, the things that are considered complicated to show that it's simple, it's just a diff. As you said, it doesn't seem technically complicated. No, it's probably not. But it's not common knowledge, and it's not contextualized, so that you understand this is what people are doing in the parliament for a nice salary, and they're just not doing very much, actually.
I mean, it's so, today it's so obvious that of course all hacking should be done using a version control system, because else you cannot collaborate about the coding. It's just, it's stupid to just throw some code and then throw the next person and then throw the next person. But hey, think about it, that's actually what the Linux kernel and everybody else did only, when did they start using this commercial version control system for a couple of years? It's not that long ago. What they do in the parliament now is they are writing Word documents, throwing them around as Word documents. And we all know that Word documents is crap internally. I mean, so the structure, the way that they're actually practically working is not the most optimal, but also in addition to that, the whole machinery, the technical staff who are supporting the institution, who gets a hell of a lot of money and running a hell of a lot of computer stuff inside the parliament, they are bound by a lot of things. One of the things they are bound by is what they release, what they publish, or what they allow the politicians or the processing to publish must be official. You cannot publish something that is in the meantime, it's temporary, or this is how far there's no such thing as a draft, as I understand. Sure, there's such a thing as a draft, but a draft, ooh, that is something that needs to be translated into how many languages? And all of these things, because a draft is an official draft. If it's not official, it doesn't exist in the publication machinery. So there's this crazy thing that all of the things that we are take for granted about release early, release often. Sure, that Mozilla maybe releasing now they're releasing relatively quickly. But if you are annoyed by their releases, you just grab their Git results or Subversion or whatever they use, and then you just cherry pick whatever changes you want for them, and then you maybe add something yourself. But the parliament don't have this mindset that, oh, if you don't want the official version, you can have the unofficial tracking, because they don't have this layer of transparency.
Another example is that some dossiers are you table amendments to the legislation, and sometimes it's thousands of amendments. And when there are thousands of amendments, then it takes time. Then it should be translated, and they have to be compiled, and then people have to talk to each other if they can find compromises. And I think it would be pretty, and this process can take months, 3 or 4, maybe half a year.
Translated into for normal English, what he just said about tabling amendments, I didn't understand until half a year later. What he just said, table amendments means making branches, creating branches. So you create a personal branch, and then you make just a little change. Maybe you're changing 3 words in the whole document. That's another branch. That is a tabling amendment. And a suggestion for, I think we should change this piece in the text. But they're doing that by publishing another Word document. They don't have the mechanical, the technical tracking of where was the source, where was the next version, And imagine that they then politically, maybe as a trick to pollute the whole political process, they file 200 branches, so that you have to vote about 200 different things, and you have no technical means of comparing which of these branches are relevant, which of these are politically loaded, which of these are just noise. You don't know because you can't compare, you can't diff the things. There, you can also have, if you can then reverse engineer and get it back into a Git tree. Actually, my dream is that the core, what I do, the main export I do from this Catmandu processing, is that I export to Git, so that we just publish a Git of all of these. And then everybody can operate with this Git, and all of the parliamentary workers, they can then have a different output. We can add something on top of Git. There's a lot of people who have written GUI interfaces for Git. And then they can have their browsing through the whole history, something that is impossible to do in the current systems.
And you probably need some quite well worked out visualization tools on top of that.
Oh yeah.
Creating that tree structure is a good thing, and having all the data organized, but then you need to actually visualize it in a way so you can actually create meaning for people who are not so technically savvy.
Sure, that would be lovely, and that is obviously the next step. But I'm happy that the thing that worked for ACTA in this crappy wiki approach did not need any. Okay, fire. It didn't need the nice GUIs. That's an extra bonus that we actually, when we have a reliable structure, which Git is, it's a well-defined structure. Then we can add on top of that. We cannot add on top of a pile of Word documents. It's not possible. And then if you were here for the last talk with Eric, the one project that was open source, AT4AM was the name of it. One of the purposes of that code is actually code that can visualize amendments, so differences, proposals for differences. And the main coder, the only coder of this project, the delete code at least, he actually told me that, oh yeah, sure, but that will be 5 years or something before we have anything close to something that could be interacting with it. And so that, sure, they have been working, and now they kill it off after 1 year of working. So, it's so obvious that the core shouldn't be some custom thing.
I think that we have to look for ways to get non-technical people into this kind of computational thinking and problem solving. Even if you're using GI tools, I think we need an understanding of why this works and why we should do it this way and that way. And so.
You mean for telling the story about what is relevant of this, or do you mean that non-technical persons should actually solve the technical problems? I don't follow that. That's really
well, solving problems computationally with diffs and version control instead of throwing word options, which is kind of what you would do on paper with typewriters.
Yeah,
I'm saying it's more of a mindset.
Yeah,
it's a mindset. Yeah.
I mean, if your dream or what you're thinking is that we should try to help convince the parliamentary workers of not writing Word documents in the first place, but working with Gits, with nice user interfaces and stuff. That process, that's what AT4AM was. We're trying to solve this problem of, in the first place, working well structured. And that is a very, very slow process. And you don't just tell people, oh, by the way, use a different program instead, and use a different working process. Because they have this whole formalization process. They have to be able to stamp things. And no, we're not talking about GPT signing some tags in Git. They haven't written the laws of what does a formalization mean tied to Git. We just need to have a consensus in order for shifting to a different tool. They need the whole lawmaking process to be recognizing what this is. So forget about it, it's 10 years. If they want it for 10 years. It is never if they want it for 3 years and then shift direction. So it's not likely that they change away from Word documents the next 5 years, and it's not likely that they ever change to using Git as a core thing.
Challenge exists everywhere in any office or educational institution, really.
Yeah.
So,
Can't one just make some Word templates that can't one make some Word templates that the secretaries can fill in, and then the layout and styling will be the same?
Yeah, but remember that in the first place the problem was that it is leaked unofficial documents. So what you are asking is to convince the secretaries of the offices that are working secretly to please could you use this template so that when we leak your document it will be more easy for us to process the comparison and expose more of what you did behind closed doors. No, that's a flaw somewhere. You see? But I know what you mean, and it would be great if they could just standardize on more than the tool, but also on the template they're using. But and also I hope that it's not, as you also said about the different, is like it isn't that big a challenge.
If there are official institutions, maybe they should have some more official way of writing this document.
Yes, but that's exactly the official part. The official part is they have to release it with PDF X/1 standardized so-and-so documents, which means that what we're talking about is the process before it becomes official. So sure, they have high standards for themselves, so high that that's not the process we're talking about. We're talking about digging into their internal working process and wanting to participate more in that. We wanted to have open doors. We could have had that. Sure, the ideal way, open the doors. Then we don't need the rest of it.
Unfortunately, we are over time now.
Okay.
But thank you, Jonas. Dr. Jones, your address.